Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cold Radio, the channel that brings you creepy, mysterious, and true horror stories that will give you goosebumps in the middle of the night. And now, let me take you into the story. I was followed home by a stranger in a black hoodie. I've always considered myself someone who doesn't scare easily. You know the type. The kind of person who rolls their eyes at jump scares in horror movies, who walks through dark alleys in the city without a second thought, who laughs off ghost stories as campfire nonsense. I'm not saying I'm invincible or anything, but growing up in places like Philadelphia and Boston, you learn to trust your instincts, to spot trouble before it spots you. You get used to the rhythm of city life, the honking horns, the chatter of strangers, the way streetlights hum at night. You develop a kind of armor, a confidence that says you can handle whatever comes your way. But there was this one night, about 6 months ago, that shattered all of that. It's not the kind of story you tell casually over drinks or bring up at a party. It's the kind you whisper in the dark when you're alone, when you're sure no one else is listening. I'm still not sure I've made sense of it myself, but I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, every detail as I remember it. And I swear, every word of this is true. It was early March, one of those raw, bone-chilling nights where the cold seeps into your skin and stays there. No matter how tightly you pull your jacket, the air was damp, heavy with the promise of rain, and a thin fog had settled over everything, making the world feel soft and blurry at the edges. I just moved to a small city in upstate New York called Redfield, chasing a freelance gig that had turned into something more permanent. I'm a graphic designer, mostly self-employed, picking up contracts for startups and small businesses. This one was a decent deal. A tech company working on some app I didn't fully understand, but they needed someone in-house for a few months, and I needed a change of pace. Redfield wasn't my first choice. It's not exactly a bustling hub. Think old brick buildings, a main street with a diner that still serves pie in glass cases, and a hardware store that smells like sawdust and motor oil. It's the kind of place where people know each other's names, where the streets empty out by 9 p.m., and the silence at night feels almost too big. I'd rented an apartment on the edge of town, a second-floor walk-up in a converted house that had seen better days. The building was old, probably from the early 1900s, with creaky wooden floors, peeling paint on the exterior, and windows that rattled whenever the wind picked up. It was split into 3 units. Mine at the top, a quiet woman named Marjorie on the first floor, and the landlord, Carl, who lived in a cramped basement apartment that always smelled faintly of mildew. The place wasn't fancy, definitely a downgrade from my old loft in Philly, but it was cheap, and I liked the solitude. No roommates to deal with, no upstairs neighbors stomping around at midnight, just me, my laptop, and a view of the street lined with bare, skeletal trees. I told myself it was temporary, a place to crash while I sorted out my next move. Besides, the quiet was nice, or at least it was at first. Carl, the landlord, was a gruff guy in his 60s, with a gray beard and a habit of squinting like he was sizing you up. He didn't talk much, just handed me the keys and a handwritten list of rules. Don't leave trash in the foyer, no loud music after 10 p.m., that kind of thing. Marjorie, the other tenant, was even less talkative. She was in her 40s, maybe, with tired eyes and a nervous way of moving, always hurrying out the door with her head down, like she was afraid of being noticed. I'd nod at her in passing, but we never exchanged more than a quick, "Hey." The neighborhood itself was peaceful, almost eerily so. It was all residential, rows of old houses with sagging porches, a few newer condos, and a small park at the end of the street where kids played during the day. At night, though, it was like the whole place went to sleep. No traffic, no voices, just the wind whispering through the trees and the occasional creak of a shutter. That night, I'd been working late at a coffee shop downtown, one of those trendy spots with Edison bulbs and overpriced lattes. It was called Brew and Bean, and it had become my go-to place since moving to Redfield. The Wi-Fi was reliable, the coffee was decent, and they stayed open until midnight, which was rare for a town like this. I'd been there for hours, hunched over my laptop, tweaking a logo for the startup. My headphones were on, blasting a lo-fi playlist that drowned out the chatter of the few other customers. A couple of college kids studying, a guy in a flannel reading a paperback, the barista wiping down the counter. I was in the zone, lost in the details of gradients and font weights, barely noticing the time. When I finally looked up, the clock on the wall read 11:27 p.m. The barista was starting to stack chairs, giving me that polite but pointed, "We're closing soon" look. I packed up my laptop, slung my bag over my shoulder, and headed out into the night. The street outside was quiet, almost too quiet. The shops along Main Street were shuttered, their neon signs flickering faintly, casting long shadows across the pavement. The fog was thicker now, curling around the streetlights like smoke, turning them into soft, glowing orbs. The air was sharp, biting at my face, and my breath puffed out in little clouds as I started the walk home. It was about a mile, maybe a bit more, through the downtown area and into my neighborhood. I didn't have a car. Redfield was small enough that I could get by on foot, and I liked the exercise. I pulled my jacket tighter, stuffed my hands in my pockets, and let the music in my headphones set the pace. The streets were empty, which wasn't unusual for a Tuesday night. A few cars passed, their headlights cutting through the fog, but otherwise, it was just me and the sound of my sneakers crunching on the gravelly sidewalk. I wasn't thinking about much. Deadlines, maybe grabbing groceries tomorrow, wondering if I should pitch a new design concept to the startup. My mind was wandering the way it does when you're tired and the night feels endless. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine, but someone else's behind me. A faint crunch, crunch, crunch on the gravel. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Footsteps aren't exactly rare, even in a quiet town like Redfield. I figured it was someone else heading home, a waiter from the diner maybe, or a delivery driver finishing a shift. But there was something about the sound that felt off. The steps didn't match my pace. I was walking fast, the music giving me a quick rhythm. But these steps were slower, deliberate, like whoever it was wasn't in a hurry. I slowed down a bit, testing it, and the footsteps slowed too, keeping the same distance, maybe 30 feet behind me. My heart gave a little jolt, that first flicker of unease, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just someone walking the same way. Happens all the time. I pulled out one earbud, letting the music fade into a tinny hum, and listened. The footsteps were still there, steady and unhurried, echoing faintly in the fog. I glanced over my shoulder, trying to play it cool, like I was just checking the street for traffic. There was someone back there, a figure in a dark hoodie, head down, hands in their pockets. The fog made it hard to see details. They were just a silhouette, tall and lanky, moving with a slow, almost mechanical gait. I couldn't make out a face, just the outline of the hood, pulled low over their eyes. I turned back, my pulse picking up, and kept walking. It's fine, I told myself. Just some guy heading home. Redfield's safe, right? Nothing to worry about. But the footsteps didn't stop, didn't veer off down a side street. They stayed with me, matching my turns as I crossed from one block to the next. I decided to take a longer route, cutting through a side street lined with old Victorian houses, their windows dark and curtains drawn tight. The streetlights were dimmer here, the fog thicker, swallowing the light in soft, hazy clouds. The footsteps followed, still that same steady crunch, never speeding up, never falling behind. I felt that itch on the back of my neck, that primal instinct that says you're being watched. I glanced back again, and the figure was still there, closer now, maybe 20 feet away. The black hoodie blended into the shadows, but I could see the shape of them more clearly. Tall, shoulders hunched, hands still in their pockets. I couldn't see their face, just darkness under the hood, but I swore they were looking at me, their head tilted just enough to make my skin crawl. I told myself to stay calm. I was almost home, just a few more blocks. I didn't want to run. Running makes you look scared, makes you a target. So I kept walking, faster now, my breath coming in quick, shallow bursts, the cold air stinging my lungs. The footsteps sped up too, just enough to keep pace, always that same distance, like they were playing with me. I took another turn, this time onto a wider street with a few parked cars and a gas station at the corner, its neon sign flickering red and blue. The footsteps followed, relentless, the sound drilling into my head. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and checked the time, 11:48 p.m. I thought about calling someone, My friend Sam back in Philly, maybe, or even 911. But what would I say? Some guy in a hoodie is walking behind me? It sounded stupid, paranoid. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and kept going, my heart pounding louder with every step. I reached my street, the familiar row of trees and old houses coming into view. The footsteps were closer now, maybe 15 feet behind, so clear I could hear the gravel crunching under their weight. I didn't look back this time. I couldn't. My hands were trembling as I fished out my keys, the metal cold against my fingers. The foyer light in my building was out. Carl was notorious for letting maintenance slide. And the entrance looked like a black void, the glass door reflecting nothing but the street behind me. I glanced at the reflection, and there they were, the figure in the black hoodie, standing at the corner under a streetlight, motionless. They didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, head tilted slightly, like they were waiting for me to do something. My stomach twisted, and I fumbled with the keys, finally getting the door open. I slipped inside, slammed it shut, and turned the lock, the click echoing in the silent foyer. I stood there for a moment, my back against the door, listening. My breath was loud, ragged, and my heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I waited for the sound of footsteps, for a knock, for anything. But there was nothing. Just the wind outside, rattling the windows, and the faint hum of a car in the distance. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my legs shaky, each step creaking under my weight. I kept glancing back, half expecting to see that figure standing in the foyer, but it was empty, just shadows pooling in the corners. I got to my apartment, unlocked the door with trembling hands, and locked it behind me, sliding the deadbolt into place for good measure. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. I dropped my bag on the couch, turned on every light, the overhead, the lamp by the TV, even the little one in the kitchen, and stood there, trying to steady my breathing. I told myself I was fine, that I'd made it home, that it was just some random person walking the same way. Redfield was safe, boring even, nothing to worry about. I walked to the window, parted the blinds with one finger, and peeked out. The street was empty now, no sign of the figure, no black hoodie lurking in the shadows. The streetlights glowed softly, their light diffused by the lingering fog. I let out a shaky breath, trying to laugh it off. I was being ridiculous, right? Just some guy, probably headed to the gas station or a late-night diner. My imagination was running wild, turning a normal night into something out of a thriller. But I couldn't shake it. I kept replaying the walk home in my head, the footsteps, the way they matched my pace, the figure standing at the corner, watching. I checked the locks again, then grabbed a kitchen knife and set it on the coffee table, feeling a little silly, but not silly enough to put it away. I tried to work, opening my laptop and pulling up the logo I'd been tweaking, but I couldn't focus. Every noise made me jump. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, the wind whistling through the gaps in the windows. I kept glancing at the door, then the window, half expecting to see a face pressed against the glass, those shadowed eyes staring in. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, the knife within reach, my phone in my hand, scrolling through nothing just to keep my hands busy. I kept the TV on, some late-night talk show playing low in the background, but it didn't help. The apartment felt too small, the walls too close, like they were pressing in on me. I kept thinking about the figure, the way they stood so still, like they knew I'd see them. I wondered if they'd followed me all the way home, if they were still out there, waiting in the fog. The next morning, I was a wreck. My eyes were bloodshot, my head pounding from lack of sleep. I stood at the window, sipping coffee that tasted like ash, and watched the street come to life. A neighbor walked their dog, a delivery van rumbled by, kids in backpacks headed to the bus stop. Everything looked normal, painfully normal, like the night before had been a dream. I told myself I'd overreacted, that I'd let the fog and the quiet get to me. I showered, changed, and headed to the coffee shop, taking a different route this time, sticking to busier streets with morning traffic and joggers. The day passed without incident. Work, emails, a quick lunch at the diner. By evening, I was starting to feel a little foolish, like I'd built the whole thing up in my head. That night, I got home earlier, around 9 p.m., before the streets got too quiet. The fog was gone. The air clear and cold, the stars sharp overhead. I kept my headphones off, listening for any sound out of place, but there was nothing. Just the usual hum of the neighborhood, a dog barking a few blocks away, the rustle of leaves in the wind. I unlocked the foyer door, climbed the stairs, and let myself into the apartment, locking the door behind me. I was halfway to the couch when I heard it, a faint creak, like someone stepping on the loose board at the bottom of the staircase. I froze, my hands still on the deadbolt, my heart kicking into overdrive. I turned slowly, peering down the dark stairwell through the glass panel in my door. The foyer was empty, just shadows and the faint glow of a streetlight filtering through the window. I told myself it was nothing, just the house settling, or maybe Carl coming in from the basement. But I moved faster, checking the locks again, turning on every light. I stood in the middle of the living room, listening, my breath shallow. No more creaks, no footsteps, just the hum of the fridge and the wind outside. I was fine, I told myself. I was fine. I poured a glass of water, my hands still trembling, and sat on the couch, trying to calm down. That's when I saw the note. It was on the kitchen counter, a small piece of paper folded in half, like it had been slipped under the door. I hadn't noticed it when I came in, but I'd been so rattled I could have missed it. I picked it up, my fingers cold, and unfolded it. The handwriting was messy, scrawled in black ink. You shouldn't walk alone at night. My stomach dropped. I checked the door again, made sure the deadbolt was secure, then looked out the window. The street was empty, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. I grabbed my phone, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button, but I hesitated. A note wasn't a crime, right? Maybe it was a prank or something Marjorie had dropped by mistake. Maybe it wasn't even meant for me, but I knew better. I could feel it, that same itch on the back of my neck, that same sense of being watched. I checked the locks one more time, grabbed the knife, and sat on the couch, the note crumpled in my hand. I didn't sleep that night either. I kept the lights on, the TV blaring, my eyes darting to the window, the door, the shadows in the corners. I kept thinking about the figure in the black hoodie, the way they stood at the corner, watching. And I kept wondering, had they followed me all the way home? Were they still out there waiting? Or worse, had they been closer than I thought? The next few days were quiet, almost too quiet. No footsteps, no figures in hoodies, no more notes. I started to relax, to tell myself it was just a weird night, a one-off that I'd blown out of proportion. I went back to my routine, coffee shop, work, home, though I made sure to be back before dark, sticking to well-lit streets with people around. I even joked about it with a coworker, laughing about how I'd turned into one of those paranoid city kids who sees danger everywhere. But deep down, I wasn't laughing. I kept checking over my shoulder, kept listening for those footsteps. And every night, I'd double-check the locks, peek through the blinds, make sure the street was empty. A week later, it happened again. I was walking home from the coffee shop around 8 p.m., sticking to the main road where the streetlights were bright and a few joggers were still out. I had my headphones in, but the volume was low, just enough to hear the world around me. I was halfway home when I heard it, those footsteps again, that same steady crunch, crunch, crunch on the pavement. I stopped dead, my heart racing, and pulled out my earbuds. The sound stopped too, like whoever it was didn't want to be heard. I turned around, scanning the street, my breath catching in my throat. There, at the edge of a streetlight's glow, was the figure in the black hoodie, standing still, head down, hands in their pockets. I couldn't see their face, but I felt it. They were watching me, their head tilted just enough to make my skin crawl. I didn't wait. I turned and walked faster, my breath hitching, my hands clenched around my phone. The footsteps started again, keeping pace, always just far enough behind that I couldn't be sure if they were really following me or if I was losing it. I took a different route, cutting through an alley I usually avoided, its walls lined with overflowing dumpsters and flickering lights. The footsteps followed, faster now, closer. I broke into a run, my bag bouncing against my side, my lungs burning as I sprinted toward my street. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I reached my building, fumbling with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. I slammed it shut, locked it, and ran up the stairs, my heart pounding like it was going to explode. I got to my apartment, locked the door, and stood there, panting, listening. No footsteps, no creaks, just the sound of my own breathing, loud and ragged. I looked out the window, my hands shaking as I parted the blinds. The street was empty, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. No figure, no hoodie, nothing. But when I turned around, I saw it, another note